Welcome to Soul Path Community Friday class. Today we're talking about work, career, and calling in the astrology chart. I took these slides from a presentation I gave at ISAR a few years ago, kind of brought it down to just the simple, most basic aspects of what you need to look at in a chart to understand what someone's true life mission might be, and also to understand that we're operating in a spiral. We're operating, starting out as a child with the things that are interesting to us or natural talents, our thoughts about ourselves, and then we move into usually kind of entry jobs. Many times the entry jobs are based on what we're able to get, or family helping us, or the first kinds of education that we got before we know ourselves well. And yet everything is moving together to create ultimately what's known as career, what we're known for. So one of the first and always ground rock aspects to me for career is the lunar nodes and the story of the lunar nodes. It includes the planets that are conjunct the nodes, squaring them, ruling them. It is a big piece of information. And with the lunar nodes, uh, forming like the core of the gifts that you're bringing in and the developmental process that you go through to evolve. We also, of course, can look at the midheaven and the 10th house. I think Saturn, Pluto, and Mars are really important because we've got, Saturn, and I'll go into these in a little more detail, but Saturn representing a karmic mandate that you have been working on for a while and carries with it that heavy sense of, I don't know if I can get this, but if I get it, I will consider myself successful. Pluto, transformation, and the emotional energies that are locked up inside us and prevent us from being in our power. Mars, where we go forward and we make it happen, and that's a very important planet for vocation. We've got vocational houses and their ruling planets, and we've got, uh, as always, kind of the whole chart, all the planets. Like we can focus in on some things, like for instance, for a relationship, we might focus in on the seventh house, maybe the eighth and the fifth as relationship houses. But, we have relationship in every part of the chart. We have our relationship with our bosses in the 10th house. We have our relationship with nature in the 12th. So there's nothing that we would ever look at and say, oh, it's just this little tiny thing. But there are areas that have more emphasis. And then, of course, we have to consider the astrology rule of three, which is that the if something is shown in the chart one time, it only might happen. You can't count on it. And two times, it's likely, and three times, you can almost guarantee it. So when we're looking at vocation, we've got a lot of different things to look at, and how do they back each other up, or in what way do they help to describe each other? Because really, ultimately, the whole chart is going to speak of your soul's purpose, and a big piece of soul's purpose is generally going to be vocation. There's a book written a number of years ago by James Hillman, noted psychologist, called The Soul's Code: In Search of Character and Calling. And in the opening chapter, the thing that he writes that I love so much was about the acorn in the tree. And he gives examples of children that had certain qualities, qualities that maybe good intentioned parents may try to stop them from, mold them from, be worried about, try to encourage in other directions. But he points out that the qualities that children have are the acorn, the seed of the tree that they're meant to grow into. So, for instance, the little boy who's diagnosed with ADHD, who's running around all the time, he's very physical, he's always falling because he's going so fast. He grows up and becomes a race car driver. And the little girl who seems like she's got social anxiety and she's very shy and she prefers to spend time in her room just playing with the things that she's playing with, she grows up and becomes a researcher where she spends many, many hours in a lab and likes her alone time, needs her alone time. So that's the first thing, go back and think about how you were naturally as a child, how it relates to your chart, and from there look at how then you grew and evolved to become who you are and end up ultimately in the kind of jobs or the career that you ended up with. Now, in terms of the lunar nodes, I think everybody here pretty much knows this. The South Node gives our gifts and habit patterns, and the gift part of a South Node is often the gift that we're meant to give to the world. It's the quality of that sign that we are a world expert in more than the person who has their sun in that sign. And that may often have like kind of a core level root about the way that we embody in the world and some of these major soul center gifts that we have. The North Node representing the blockage that we experienced in past lives and the medicine, the energy that we need to cultivate and develop to bring our nodes into balance. That will be important to consider in terms of career. And then again, planets that aspect and rule create nuance and help us understand more fully what it is we're here to do. Now, a little bit of an example here to look at is Steph Curry, the noted basketball player for the Golden State Warriors. And I've been following this basketball team for a long, long time. And Steph is an interesting guy because he's basically changed basketball. He was much smaller than the average basketball player. And when he was first playing basketball, like in college and early professional, people were not thinking he was great, because he was so small. And he did a lot more work on his own to develop his skills. And he worked with a lot of cutting edge trainers and people doing different kinds of healing modalities in order to become, literally the best 3-point shooter, I think, ever, probably. And in a way, kind of changed the game so that more players who were smaller and had these special skills started to ascend. And there was studies many years ago, a study, not a lot of well-known astrological studies with research, but a French couple did a study called the Gauquelin uh, research study, and it was about athletes. And what they suggested was that if a person had Mars within 10 degrees on either side of the midheaven, that they would likely be an athlete, and that proved out to be statistically correct. Now, Steph doesn't have Mars within, 10 degrees of that midheaven, but what he does have is the sign of Aries, which is ruled by Mars. And then he has Mars in the sixth house of work, service, and health, and having to do with the hard work. It's in Capricorn, right? Mars in Capricorn is grinding. It's like I'm working on something, putting all my energy into it, but I'm doing it in a skillful way. And it's in the sixth house where, one does health kinds of things, and it's along with the three planets that were part of the late 80s and the harmonic convergence, where you see, in my mind, the imprint of people who are going to go into the system in some way and change it from the inside. So we have many millennials born in 88 to 90 who have those three planets, Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune, and they are going into various kinds of businesses. Maybe they're a lawyer, maybe they're in a corporate world, but I am expecting them to completely transform whatever system they're in. Uranus breaks things up. Saturn develops success and strategy. And Neptune can bring in this very high spiritual, almost magical creative energy. And of course, he is a Pisces. And the Virgo South Node in the third house also is an indication of this skillful, perfectionistic work that he has done in order to launch himself to this level within the world. And, it's interesting, he has the moon in the seventh house, and his wife is well known as a chef and a restaurateur. And there's the moon in Aquarius, that she has this great footprint herself in a very successful way. Another piece that you might consider when you're looking at vocation is the ascendant. The ascendant or rising sign uh, changes signs usually about every 2 hours. In the springtime, a little faster, more like an hour. In the fall, Virgo and Libra, maybe 3, 4 hours. But whatever the ascendant is, there are, this shows how we move things forward and how people see us on the surface. So that often has something to do with the vocation, because people react to our ascendant and we push ourselves forward into the world, not just with the ascendant and its sign and the first house planets, but also the planets that aspect the ascendant tell us the way in which we move things forward. So if we have a fire sign ascendant with trines to other planets in fire signs, we might move things very quickly and intuitively on kind of a gut instinct level. Whereas if we have something that's more earthy, and let's say it's in square to a planet like Saturn, we move things forward more deliberately. There's a lot of planning and solidity, but ultimately we build something that can hopefully stand the test of time, which of course is the energy of Saturn as a planet. So we talk about Saturn as the planet that's in charge of our mastery, accomplishment, and success. As I mentioned earlier, I think it carries the unfinished business from the past. That means it also carries uh, fear and guilt, the sense that the bottom will fall out, the sense that we don't have what it takes. There can be quite a lot of inner critic that goes along with Saturn as it relates to our vocation. And yet we also know that with Saturn, we have to look at what it is we need to let go of and define what we're working on and then work on it. And especially if the Saturn is connected to the houses that relate to vocation, we will have a pretty strong message that we need to be patient with the process and work hard. Plus, the Saturn in the sign that it's in, the house it's in, is likely to give us a pretty strong message about some aspect of what our vocational plan is for this life. Now, Pluto represents more of our destiny, our personal destiny, and where we are empowered, as well as our alignment with our generation and the generational goals on a career level. Now, with the alignment to ourself and what Pluto means there, I've heard it said, and I believe this is really true, that when we do our Pluto, when we spend time with Pluto and make friends with the fears and the deep emotional wounding that's carried in Pluto, it's like the receptor of this pain, shame, fear, rage energy that is an unconscious part of our humanness. Is for some more conscious than others, but all of that intense energy from our karmic experiences is locked up in our Pluto. And when we work with that and heal that and come into honesty and power and integrity, we begin to do the work we're meant to do in the world. We're not held back by the Pluto fears anymore. So there is this way that as we operate our Pluto in the sign that it's in, the house that it's in a powerful way, that is a key aspect of vocation. And you'll see that again and again, that a person feels empowered and like they're really doing what they're here to do when Pluto is activated. And then Mars, the planet of will, desire, action, initiation, moving things forward. With Mars, we get connected to the will with a capital W of our soul, of our high self, and hopefully soften the will of the ego that doesn't care about anybody else and it's just, I want what I want and I want it now. But we come into a higher frequency, and then Mars can drive us forward in a very high place. Now, here's the chart of a businessman in the tech world. And just looking here simply at a vocation, this is someone who's done a couple of tech invention startups. And you start with the South Node in Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter in Scorpio. And this is somebody that is used to operating according to their beliefs. And beliefs in Scorpio can be deep and intense, and there can also be a strong psychic capacity and an ability to see things that can go wrong that other people are missing. So, in terms of being a business person, a certain amount of Scorpio I've seen can often be very helpful. I mean, Scorpio at a, we'll talk about this in a moment, but, Scorpio can be related to things like psychology, finance, um, regeneration, like projects that are about um, recycling and saving the oceans and things like that. You'll see that. But just in a more general way, if someone has strong Scorpio energy, they see things that other people are overlooking or kind of have rose-colored glasses on and think, oh, that won't happen. And Scorpio will be able to perceive things and then figure it out by research or by psychic intention. And Sagittarius is a sign that's very good for sales and marketing. The Sagittarian can kind of, talk somebody into, doing anything. So this is very helpful in a business way. But the North Node in Gemini suggests having to learn more and listen to more and understand other people's motivations a little bit better. And maybe in the long run, you could think of being of service. The Jupiter is expansive. Jupiter in Scorpio is expansive. It's wealthy. Uh, and then the ruling planet of the Gemini North Node is Mercury. And the Mercury in Pisces, the sign of service and compassion for those who are suffering. And next to Venus, wanting to relate in a way that is spiritual and intuitive. And Mars in Aries is very initiating. Again, this is like the little boy that's got ADHD and is running around knocking into walls, but it's great energy for starting something. And you can see that Pluto and Saturn are up here in Leo, and these are in a trine to Mars, and Mars is close enough to Mercury, the soul's purpose. And so you can see with Mars and Saturn together that we've got the long-term building strategy, we've got the short-term go for it, make it happen. and there we get more of this intensity in the eighth house. Now, uh, this person built a couple of tech companies that were, just sort of solving tech problems, but now in later life is building a tech business that works to solve problems in the nonprofit sphere. In terms of houses and their rulers, this adds depth to our analysis. The three main houses would be second, sixth, and 12th. So the second house suggests our skills and the way we apply our skills in order to create money and resources, and whether we have self-worth about those skills. So there's like, this is the pot of gold that might be a little bit hidden. And then the sixth house, this is our work style. This is the kind of jobs we first get, the way we like to do our work, and how inclined we are to feel like we're being of service or not, what our power balance is. And then the 10th house, career and reputation. This is ultimately what we're known for. So the skills feed into the work, and then the work feeds into the career. And most people don't know when they first start out what their full career is going to be. Some do. Some, children who say, I want to be a doctor, and then they get plus 4.0 plus, and they go to college and they become a doctor. That is true. Some people do that. But for many of us, we just get a job and it turns into something, and we start to notice what we like and what we don't like. And pretty soon we've got a career and we have to decide whether we're keeping it or not at key turning points, like in our Saturn returns. I think it's also, though, important to look at the 11th house, which is our long-term plans, our hopes and dreams. And I really think the 11th house is about calling. It is about the thing we would do for the world, even if we're not being paid for it. And so sometimes that's like our second career. And we see people around the 50s and 60s moving into something that's more about the 11th house qualities. And then the 12th house, which generally has a bad rap in traditional astrology, but actually in modern evolutionary astrology, we think of this as the place that shows the spiritual vocation, what it is that we are here to do from the place of our soul. And what will feed our soul is to have at least some of the energy of the 12th house embodied in our work so that we feel we can handle our work, where we are doing what we're here to do. In terms of the qualities of the houses, and again, in some way, the whole chart represents our career. When we have focus or planets in the first house, there's something that's important about ourself, the way we look, the way we engage with the world, what we personally are known for or habituated to will be very important. Second house can often have to do with finance, money issues, food. Uh, Third house, writing, teaching, speaking, anything to do with communication. Fourth house, home, office, real estate. Uh, the selling of houses. And yet the fifth house, I don't have this word here because there's not enough room for all the house words, but fifth house is gambling and speculation. So somebody who's in real estate development, for instance, might have very strong activation in the fourth house for homes, and the fifth house for the risk taking of it, the gambling part of investing in real estate. But often things that relate to the fifth house are about sports, the arts, and children. Uh, you know, taking care of children, teaching children, and we could go deeper and deeper. And as you learn more and more about the houses, you have more access to all the possibilities, and things will start to make sense. For instance, a fifth house may be about the children you have yourself. That's more about your life and your family. But it may be that you teach children, or you're a healer for children. I've seen people with strong Pisces and Neptune, which relates to care for those who are disadvantaged or, challenged in some way. And they're working in special ed with children. So that's the way you sort of apply the key aspects to each one of these houses. The sixth house suggests that we want to be in some kind of service. That's important, and maybe something that's healing. We may find ourselves in situations where there's uneven power. If somebody has Aries ruling the sixth house, I'm going to know that they either need to be entrepreneurial and do their own thing, or they need to work for a company that gives them a lot of freedom and space. Partnerships, anything to do with relationship, client work is shown in the seventh house. Eighth house, again, regeneration or recycling, psychology, medicine, finance. And ninth house, in a career way, can certainly be like professors and people who are teaching at a high level, workshop leaders, but it also relates to human resources and marketing, and of course, religions, beliefs, and things like that. But it's fascinating to me to see how many people are working in the human resources field that have a packed ninth house. 10th house, very corporate, business, leadership energies, activism and nonprofits, doing things that connect to the world, connected to the 11th house. And then finally, the 12th house, spiritual service, nursing, working in prisons, working in hospice, the people who work with people who are really sick or dying or often have strong 8th and 12th house aspects. Now, just a little bit, I'm not going to go through all of these, but the signs, you know what the signs mean. So, whatever planets we're talking about or house cusps will be connected. So, I, mentioned a lot of these words just looking at the houses, but it will also be the kinds of work a person wants to do when they have a planet in these signs. So, somebody who has Saturn in Aquarius, for instance, you'll think of all the things Aquarius rules. Technology and invention are top, but also um, things that are, really radically changing, nonprofits, um, mm, things that are highly intellectual, that require, a fast mind will be connected to the Aquarian imprint. So again, this is like a spiral dance. We go around in circles, and the soul keeps building. It keeps drawing us to pieces of learning, jobs, information, until we are where we need to be, where the soul's destiny actually is. Um, Here's my chart for a moment, and just going up here to this corner, you know me as an astrologer, teacher, author, all the, org work that I do. But I started out as a secretary and then an administrative assistant. I got an accounting degree at night, then an MBA in finance. And jobs that I happened to get at a law firm where I was supposed to be a secretary, but then they had me be more of a paralegal. And then that appealed to the next company that was looking for somebody in a real estate development company. And then that turned into going into corporate finance and financing real estate developers to build office buildings and 20-year planned developments. But then moving into what was actually what I love doing was coming into terms of my psychic abilities, becoming a hypnotherapist, a massage therapist, a psychosynthesis guide, a yoga teacher, all of the more esoteric things that happen. But why did I go first into business? Well, here's the South Node in Cancer. I'm naturally attuned to being a healer, mother, caretaker, but I didn't start out that way. I jumped up to the North Node, which many people do. They jump to the North Node too fast when you're not mature enough. And so here I go into the corporate world, uh, and start building my business there. Uh, but also the fact that the sixth house of work and service is ruled by Mercury, uh, and Mercury is in Pisces. I was able to do a really, good, thorough job and, be skillful in whatever I did that, led to the success. But again, the second part of life, the skills that I ended up developing in terms of hypnotherapy and healing and psychosynthesis, these are very related to Moon Mercury in uh, the 12th house. Um, you have a question, Angel? It says here you raised your hand.
Sorry, that was an accident, Kane. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Um, so coming back here, um, to Moon and Mercury, here's the psychic ability that's natural, the hypnotherapy, the psychosynthesis. These are all 12th house Pisces energies. Um, And, I could go into this in, a lot more depth probably and sort of trace it slowly, job by job, and the way that it, the chart got activated. But, the bottom line, if we start with second house, this is ruled by Venus. So the skills have a lot to do with relationship and moving things forward quickly, like seeing something, feeling something, doing it. No, there's no consideration or thought process. The sixth house is liking to work in isolation, going deep, solving problems, and again, the psychic. I think that I can go back to the success I had in the corporate world was primarily because I was so psychic. Go back here. Um, that's why there was that level. I knew things that I had no reason to know. And also, I noticed at one point, I was thinking the key thing in every job I'd ever had was that I liked talking to people on the phone. If I was in the corporate world, I was talking to the corporate attorney and talking about his weekend and his kids. And it was always this communication, people orientation that was fueling my work and my success. And then another quick example here of Maya Angelou. And, she had a major number of different jobs. I mean, she's known as a poet, an author, memoirist, civil rights activist, and she wrote all kinds of different things. Uh, and if we think about second house, she's here to solve problems and to serve. uh, Sixth house service. She's gonna build out of situations that are long and hard and coming to full fruition. And then the 10th house, Taurus, there's a stability, a security, a sense of, grinding on. But we want to look at Venus and what does Venus say about the career? And we see that Venus is conjunct Mercury in Pisces in the eighth house. So Pisces rules transcendent creativity, film, literature, anything that touches us. Mercury, of course, is about writing, teaching, and eighth house is coming out of the intensity, coming out of the wound that is transformed into power and integrity. And we see another indication of this in the lunar nodes, where the south node, very foundational in the fourth house of home and family, attunes her to beliefs and big picture thinking. But Saturn connects a lot to karma that she's experienced. And out of this, she's meant to learn more, understand things from a broader perspective, a Gemini North node, in the place of career. So it's something to do with what she's known for. And it is meant to be, communication, writing, speaking, teaching, which became, ultimately what she was very, very known for. And she has uh, Pluto in Cancer. She is the generation before the baby boomers. And this is a generation that's here to expose a lot of the toxicity that was in families, still is in families, and start to make some changes. And of course, we know that she was abused as a child, and as a result, she didn't speak for a few years. And when she did speak, she ultimately, went into some, regular jobs, was a nightclub performer. She was a sex worker for a little while, and I can tell you a little bit there where Saturn in or on the cusp of the fifth house of, creative expression and fun, playful romance, sexuality, eighth house deeper. We have, Venus here in Pisces, which rules fantasy, which sex work has a lot to do with that. Saturn has to do with something that's a business or something we're working hard on. So we can just see that little snippet, which can relate to many other things that she would do, but could relate to the fact that that was, something she felt that she had to do for a period of time. Um, So I know that was kind of fast and we're at our summary already, but I'm going to leave a little time here for you to ask some questions and to look at a couple of charts for people who are here today in the group. But the bottom line is if you start with the lunar node so you understand the soul's journey and what the soul needs to accomplish on an energetic healing level, and then you look at planets that are specifically related to accomplishment, like Saturn, or planets that are in the career houses, and you know what those career vocation houses are. And think about the fact there can be very mundane, regular choices, like you work at Burger King when you're 18 and you think that's just a job, but you're learning things that you take into other jobs later on. And understand that, again, the soul is going around and weaving together all the choices. And there will be many things that you weave in, like me getting an MBA and working in the corporate world is super important and helpful for working in the astrological organizations now. And for the longest time, I didn't know why I had spent, those years from 18 to 30 working in business. There's three good books that I would recommend to you. Astrology's Higher Octave by Greg Bogart has some interesting career vocation information in it. And both Judith Hill and Faye Blake wrote books called Vocational Astrology that goes into a lot of the nuts and bolts. And many of you have signed up for the Intuitive Skills for Astrologers class, which starts tomorrow. So we're going to have a really great group. And yeah, what else? Nothing else. Getting ready for classes for the new year. And we will bring this talk to an end for now, and we'll take a look at a couple of charts.